Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Amritpal Singh. Over the next 1 hour, we bring you all the stories and updates from India and around the world. We'll update you about the happenings in the world of business and sports and get you some interesting stories that are making the headlines. And we'll talk about the biggest story of the day, that's the unfolding situation in Afghanistan. Some big developments have taken place there. India has decided to pull out its diplomats who are on their way. But let's first begin with the headlines we're tracking at this hour. India evacuates its ambassador in Kabul and his Indian staff in the special Air Force flight. Ambassador thanked the Indian Air Force who flew them out under conditions that are not normal. The Ministry of Home Affairs introduces a new category of electronic visa called E-Emergency X-MISC visa to a fast-track visa application for entry into India. United Nations Security Council holds its second meeting on Afghanistan in 10 days. The UN chief's message of restraint to Taliban with a reminder to the world. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar reaches New York to discuss Afghanistan crisis during its engagements at the United Nations. US President Joe Biden breaks his silence on Afghanistan, says national security team and he himself are closely monitoring the situation on the ground, asserts that the mission in Afghanistan was never nation building but to prevent a terrorist attack on American homeland. Prime Minister interacts with Indian para-athlete contingent for Tokyo 2020 via video conferencing, says the government is strongly working towards strengthening and encouraging the talents that reside in rural areas. Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur thanks the Prime Minister for extending his support to athletes across the country. India administers over 88 lakh vaccine doses in 24 hours, achieves the highest single-day record of COVID-19 vaccination, says Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia. Over 55 crore 47 lakh vaccinated in past 24 hours. And the Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia reaches Assam. He's on a day-long visit to review the COVID-19 situation in northeastern states. The Maharashtra government issues new SOPs from today. So those were the headlines we were tracking at this hour, and let's begin the show with our big story or the big news. Well, amid the escalating humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, India is doing everything possible to facilitate and evacuate its citizens. In a recent effort, India has evacuated its ambassador in Kabul and his Indian staff in a special Air Force flight. After negotiations for over 24 hours, India has managed to evacuate the second batch of diplomats, officials and journalists from Kabul using an Indian Air Force C-17 Globemaster heavy lift aircraft. The Indian Air Force aircraft has arrived with all the evacuees at Jamnagar in Gujarat. Over 140 Indians from Kabul, including the last one of the Indian Embassy staff, the Indo-Tibetan border police personnel and 4 media persons arrived in India. The flight, a C-17 Globemaster, was one of the 2 military aircraft operated by the Indian Air Force for the purpose of bringing home all Indian personnel from the embassy.
इंडिया में आने के बाद बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है। भारत सरकार का तो आभार है, थैंक यू। भारत सरकार का आभार मानेंगे आप सर, आपको यहाँ पे लाया गया है, हेल्प किया है, बहुत हेल्प किया है आप लोगों ने।
And a Jawan of the Indian of the ITBP or the Indian Indo-Tibetan Border Police Force, they are basically the guys who guard our embassies abroad, said that the evacuees have been brought safely into our country.
भारतीय दूतावास काबुल और अफगानिस्तान में दूसरे काउंसुलेट की सुरक्षा की जिम्मेदारी आईटीबीपी के चुने हुए कमांडो को सौंपी गई है और हमारा ये सौभाग्य रहा है कि हम उस ड्यूटी अपनी सौंपे गए ड्यूटी में जो हमारी कर्तव्य था उसमें 100% सफल हुए हैं। हमने सही सलामत हर एक डिप्लोमेट जो भी भारतीय दूतावास में थे, जो भी वहाँ पे इंडियन मौजूद थे, उनको हमने सही सलामत एयरपोर्ट तक पहुंचाया, फर्दर यहाँ पे इंडिया तक आए वहाँ पे।
And let's listen into what the Indian ambassador to Afghanistan, Rodendra Tandon, said. He spoke to the media after landing at Jamnagar in Gujarat from Kabul. He thanked the Indian Air Force for flying them out under conditions that are not normal.
Citizens who found themselves in distress because of the fast-changing situation. So our policy was that anyone who reached the embassy was taken into the embassy. Well, I don't know how they managed inside the embassy, but we were sure that they were safe, secure, and there was an avenue for an exit. That was the general approach we followed. And we did this in two phases. We did this, and this would not have been possible without the work of the whole embassy. Different wings did different jobs. Some of the jobs I can't even mention, but it all came together, and we are finally here, safe and secure in front of you.
Also, the Ministry of Home Affairs has reviewed visa provisions in view of the current situation in Afghanistan. The ministry in a tweet said a new category of electronic visa, it's called the E-Emergency X Miscellaneous Visa, was introduced to fast-track the visa applications for entry into India. And earlier, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar informed that India is continuously monitoring the situation in Kabul. He urged that accurate information about Indians there would be provided by all concerned to the MEA Special Afghanistan Cell at phone number 9717785379, and email. They could also email at mehelpdeskindia@gmail.com. He added that India is in constant touch with the Sikh and Hindu community leaders in Kabul, and their welfare will get priority and attention of the government. And my colleague Vishal Baristo, who's tracking this flight which is coming into India, which has already come into India. Vishal, I understand that the flight has landed in Jamnagar in Gujarat. When is it expected in Delhi? How many people were on board? And also, if you could tell us, apart from the embassy staff and the ITBP personnel who are part of the mission because they guard the mission, who else is on the flight? Are there any civilians who have come into India as well?
Well, a very good afternoon to you, Amrit. This is the third flight, and Globe Master carried 140 odd Indians that were rescued from Kabul, and the flight landed at 11 o'clock at the Jamnagar airport, and from there it would also come to Delhi, back to Delhi after it's being refueled. And let me tell you that the rescue operation has been on. The Indian government is very much serious. Today, the Globe Master was carrying diplomats. You heard the Indian ambassador who was there in the flight, Rudrendra, Mr. R. Tandon, and also you have scribes. The 4 journalists have also been there, and so the government of India is very much serious about this issue. Earlier, we saw the Air India carrying Indian passengers from on Sunday and on Monday. So this was the third day. The rescue operation is on. The Home Ministry has already announced an electronic visa so that as soon as possible, all those who are stranded in Afghanistan because of the situation which is deteriorating as we speak, from bad to worse, they are rescued and brought back safely to India.
So you're saying there are more civilians left in Afghanistan as of now?
Yeah, there are the operations would continue, and that is why the Home Ministry has announced electronic visa. There are more people stranded there, and Indian government is trying all it can to save rescue its citizens from the situation there. And you saw how Globe Master, which is one of the largest aircrafts that Indian Army has, Indian Air Force has, I beg your pardon. So it's doing a commendable job, and Indian Armed Forces, the ITBP and other police personnel, they are also playing a crucial role as far as this rescue operation is concerned.
All right, Vishal, many thanks for joining in and giving us that update. And moving on, staying on the same story, a displaced Afghan national who fled from Kabul a month back spoke of his woes in Afghanistan. He's currently in New Delhi and he spoke to the media. This is what he had to say.
एक महीना हो गया उधर जंग था, बहुत बुरा हालत था, इससे हम आए अभी अफगानिस्तान सब तालिबान कब्जा गया, अभी भी सही हालत नहीं है लोगों का। कुंदुज तो अमाम साहिब पे बहुत ख़राब हालत है, उधर हर दिन में जंग था, हर दिन में बच्चे मरता है, हर दिन लोग मरता है उधर।
And speaking on the humanitarian crisis, UN spokesperson Stephen Dujarric said that UN humanitarians and their partners continue to deliver relief to more than 17,500 displaced people in Kabul, despite challenges from the Afghanistan crisis. Speaking to reporters in New York, the UN spokesperson said that there has been an influx of people fleeing to Kabul and other large cities since July, seeking safety from the conflict and other threats.
Since July 1st, there's been an influx of people fleeing Kabul to Kabul and other large cities seeking safety from the conflict and other threats. 17,500 newly internally displaced people have been identified in the past month, most of them arriving in recent days and have arrived from Ghazni and Logar provinces. Despite intense challenges, humanitarian organizations, both the UN and NGOs in Afghanistan, are committed to delivering aid and services to millions of people in need while adhering to humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. $1.3 billion humanitarian response plan for Afghanistan remains just 38% funded, leaving an almost $800 million shortfall.
And to talk more about the story, I'm joined by Professor Harshvardhan Pant. He's a distinguished fellow at ORF. Professor Pant, many thanks for joining in. Let's talk about the situation. You know, it's 4 days since Afghanistan does not have a government. Nobody knows who is in command. We know the Taliban is out there. They in fact have taken over the presidential palace. They are in Kabul. They are in other big cities, Jalalabad, Kandahar, Mazar-e-Sharif. But there is no government in place. So what does that mean? How is the country running? Are government officials reporting to work? What is the situation? What does it mean?
No, I think nothing is happening on the ground at the moment. It's an extraordinary situation for ordinary Afghans who really don't know and who really can't even think at this point how their nation is going to evolve over the next even few days. Because Taliban certainly have power now and they can do a lot of things on the ground militarily. But I think running a state is an entirely different matter, and they do not have any experience of running a state. They don't have a governance agenda. So clearly they are at a loss. I mean, had they planned a bit, they could have perhaps thought about some of the implications of their coming to power at this dramatic scale and such a great speed. But I think at this point, what they've said today is asking government officials to come back is a reflection, I think, of their understanding that certainly they can't, continue with this state of affairs. So I think even the Taliban now know that they have to ensure that governance is back in some form at least, because otherwise, very soon it would be a situation where even things will get out of control from them. So clearly, for them to ask the government officials to come back and to their official services, to their official responsibilities, reflects an underlying unease in large parts of Afghanistan. But I'm not so sure if that's going to work. I think at the end we are going to see much more chaos, much more uncertainty, much more war-like and conflict-like situation before we see any semblance of normalcy in that war-ravaged country like Afghanistan. And unfortunately, no one is there to help them out at this particular point.
And how do you see, Professor Pant, the political process playing out? You know, sooner or later there has to be a government in place. whatever the contours of that government, even if it's Taliban-led, or even if the words being used inclusive and representative, the involving elements of the former administration, of President Ghani's administration, or other, including other minorities, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras, etc. So what is your sense? How would the political settlement play out in the coming days?
Very difficult to say, but I think what the Taliban are trying to do now is to present a face to the world. At least till such time as all the diplomats and all the foreign nationals have not evacuated, and the American forces are still there, making sure that happens. I think the Taliban are presenting a face to the world where they are saying, look, we are interested in some form of representative interim government, and we are interested in bringing all the stakeholders together. Now, I think whether or not international community takes this seriously, for other stakeholders to take Taliban seriously at face value is a big question, because clearly they, at this point when Taliban have won everything through the use of force, it's very difficult for others to believe in what Taliban are saying and believe in their good faith, because ultimately political negotiations, political reconciliation is a very, very difficult process where different stakeholders will have to present their own arguments about what kind of a political structure is going to be constructed, where their aspirations also play a role. Unfortunately, at this juncture, those stakeholders are completely at loss, because A, they do not have any backing from the international community, and B, they don't want to believe in what the Taliban are saying, because eventually if the Taliban feel that they have won it all on their own, then what prevents the Taliban from throwing away any agreement that they sign? So I think at this point there's a lot of uncertainty. There are, of course, negotiations going on in Doha, and the Taliban's advisors like China and Pakistan and others would be asking Taliban to mellow down their rhetoric, to make all the right noises, so that for at least some time, international community is not coming down very hard on Taliban. But I think it's very difficult for those stakeholders in Afghanistan to believe in what the Taliban are saying. And I think that's the real challenge. How do you generate trust between political groups who have lost trust in each other completely? And that's going to be a big challenge.
No, but Professor Pant, wasn't that the case always? I mean, look at 96. Or these tribal intestine rivalries always existed. The Pashtuns didn't want to sit with the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, they didn't like the Hazaras. So these tribal fault lines always existed in Afghanistan, not since today, since a very long time. So and it required, say, international intervention at times of the Soviets, at times of the British, at times of the Americans, and the moment they leave, things again come to where they are.
Oh yes, it's very tragic, but I think that's why you need political negotiations to make sure that these fault lines get represented in those political structures, and those political structures therefore can represent the aspirations of the majority of Afghans. At the moment, it doesn't seem like that's going to be an easy process, because what the negotiations that have been happening now for several years have shown us that there is absolute loss of lack of trust between various political entities in Afghanistan, various political stakeholders in Afghanistan. So as you are pointing out, the Pashtuns may have, the Taliban is essentially a Pashtun force. They have won it through the use of force, but others are not willing to give up so easily. And especially now, when they know that Taliban cannot be trusted with whatever they are saying, because for a long time Taliban were saying that we will move gradually, we will take everything, everyone into account, and therefore we would want to construct a modern nation state in Afghanistan. Now, of course, that they are under no pressure to do that, because the international community is not there to balance out their military superiority on the ground, then they are free to do their own bidding. And therefore, for the minorities in particular, it is very difficult to approach this with the kind of open-heartedness that perhaps is needed, because they know that the challenges, once the American forces leave, once the international community has given a carte blanche to the to the Taliban, it would be very difficult for them because they would be signing any document, any agreement, and they would be creating any political institution under the shadow of violence. And that is never sustainable. And therefore, in some ways, what we are seeing today perhaps is might be a beginning of a long drawn out process where violence and negotiations would continue to exist side by side without any hope for ordinary Afghans. And in this whole process, it's the ordinary Afghans that have been the worst sufferers, because an old order that at least had some structure had gone, and a new order is yet to come up, and that new order, no one knows what that new order is going to be.
Okay. Professor Pant, let me ask you the question that everybody is asking today, and let me try and understand with you. How come the cookie crumbled this way? I mean, there were Doha talks going on. The Americans must have had their own assessments. How did, the Afghan National Defense Forces fell like nine pins? How did things come to such a pass? If the exit had to happen, why wasn't the transition planned? Because everybody knew that, if it happens this way, it'll be a human catastrophe. So even if the Taliban had to come in, why wasn't the transition process planned and this could have been avoided? What happened? Was it that the Taliban had already negotiated with lower level officials or government officials? Because the crossing over happened at many places without a shot being fired.
Yes, I think this is going to be one of those questions that will be studied for a very long time. But I think in the short term, perhaps one can answer this by saying that, look, a lot of it has to do with the way Biden administration approached this question from the very beginning. And we can go back and say, well, a Trump administration had also negotiated directly with the Taliban, therefore making the Afghan government marginal in the whole process. That might be true, but till March, Secretary of State Blinken had written that letter to Ashraf Ghani, the then Afghan president, making it very clear that the whole process is going to unfold in stages. That while everyone knew that Americans would withdraw, Americans had assured the Afghan government and the ordinary Afghans in some ways, because they were speaking to the Afghans, that look, we are going to withdraw, but we are going to withdraw under certain conditions. We are going to ensure that there is a political process in place. We are going to ensure that these negotiations have been concluded, and we are going to ensure that the political representation problem to a certain extent is rectified. Now, suddenly, within a month or within a matter of weeks, you had the American president coming on television and saying, we are now going out of Afghanistan lock, stock and barrel by September 11, 2021. So what did that mean? That meant that that whatever pressure the Taliban were for negotiations, whatever negotiations were happening in multiple forums, Doha, Moscow, even Turkey, all of that became redundant, because the other side, the Taliban actually were not interested anymore in those negotiations in good faith. They were only doing it to save, to make it, to give them some more time. But once the Americans said we are out by September 11, 2021, everything was up for grabs. And then you had a very coordinated military strategy that was used by the Taliban forces. First taking the border areas, then moving into the countryside, and finally moving to the urban centers, certainly advised by the Pakistani military intelligence complex. But I think the idea that the other side is weak, the idea that the other side is perhaps at its most vulnerable, the idea that the other side has no backers, was a big driver in the way this whole project was initiated and the way it culminated. And I think at the end of the day, Mr. Biden has today given a speech saying that, I'm fine with my decision. But at the end of the day, it is his responsibility the way this whole process, a rather shambolic process, has happened. A process where the withdrawal process could have happened, could have been planned much better, could have been planned with regional stakeholders much better. But suddenly one fine day deciding to walk out of Afghanistan and to leave ordinary Afghans to the vagaries of the Talibani violence, I think that will be a big blot on Washington's conscience.
In fact, Professor Pant, there is a lot of anger in the streets of Kabul after last night's speech of Joe Biden. Yesterday, isn't it strange that yesterday at the UNSC emergency session, the world was pontificating at basically at the Taliban, saying, remember, it will be your responsibility, be the upholders of human rights, women, this, that, and Joe Biden comes on TV after that and says, well, we were not there for nation building. We were there to protect ourselves from threats against terrorism. Now we are out. It's between the Afghans, how they run their nation.
Yes, quite extraordinarily incompetent, and I think quite extraordinarily callous attitude of Biden administration to this whole tragedy that is unfolding in front of the world today. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Biden administration feels that that the public is with them, that the American public is with them on this question. I'm not so sure. Eventually, as the costs will start rising, I think Biden will have to pay in history books. And I think that when the history books are written, this will be looked at in the same breath as America's withdrawal from Saigon, Vietnam. And so, it is very natural in some ways that the anger that ordinary Afghans are feeling with what the Americans have done, this feeling of abandonment almost by a West, by America that used to lecture, that still lectures the world on human rights and democracy and freedom, today has left all those who stood by America at the toughest of times in Afghanistan to feeling abandoned and feeling the threat of violence from Taliban. And no plan B. There is no plan B there. There is just that we will withdraw. We have nothing to add here. There's nothing to be done about it. If the ordinary Afghans suffer its collateral damage. I think that attitude of the Biden administration will challenge Biden administration's policies for a very long time, both in Afghanistan and beyond, because who wants to be America's allies after this? And I think that's a question that America seriously will have to consider. The challenge, of course, for ordinary Afghans is that what do they do? Do they make a pact with the devil, and do they then get in some form of a engagement with the Taliban to make sure that at least they are not killed, that at least their lives are protected, whatever the consequences might be. But I think the larger challenge for the international community is what happens if tomorrow the Taliban once again become this Taliban 2.0 once again becomes Taliban 1.0, the one that we saw in 1996 to 2001. What happens if they start behaving in the same manner publicly? They're still doing it, but they're behind the doors. But tomorrow, if violence, if cruelty, if their brutality is out on television screens, how will the West acknowledge it, and how will the West respond? I think, and not only the West, I think the international community. I think that's a big question for all of us to consider and for all of us to ponder, because that's going to be a challenge sooner rather than later.
True. And the biggest challenge right now is the evolving human catastrophe that's playing out in Afghanistan. Professor Harsh Pant, many thanks. That's all the time we have for. Many thanks for joining us and lending us your insights. Meanwhile, military flights resumed at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport after it was breached by civilians desperate to fly out of the country. Our logistics specialist on Pentagon's Joint Chiefs of Staff, Major General Hank Taylor, in a press briefing told that the airport reopened at 1935 GMT yesterday. He said that a C-17 transport aircraft had landed with US Marines aboard, and a second one loaded with an Army unit was to land soon to help establish security for the airport. Taylor added that by the end of the day, the US expects nearly 3,000 to 3,500 total troops on the ground. The airport was shut down on Monday after crowds of civilians surged on to the runways.
We have approximately 2,500 troops that have moved into Kabul within the last 72 hours, and more will arrive soon. By the end of the day, we expect nearly 3,000 to 3,500 troops on the ground. First, for a real-time update, as of 15:35 local Eastern data time here, the airfield at HKI was open for operations. Shortly thereafter, the first C-17 landed with U.S. Marines on board, and the next C-17 is preparing to land as we speak.
And US President Joe Biden has strongly defended his decision to pull out troops from Afghanistan. Biden said that the mission of the United States was never supposed to be nation building, as he blamed the Taliban's takeover of the country on the unwillingness of the Afghan army to fight the militant group. Striking a defiant note, Biden said he stands squarely behind his decision to withdraw US forces from Afghanistan. He stressed that the mission in Afghanistan was solely for preventing terrorist attacks on American homeland.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I will be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
And Joe Biden warned that the Taliban of swift and forceful response from the U.S. if they attack American personnel or disrupt their operations in Afghanistan.
As we carry out this departure, we have made it clear to the Taliban, if they attack our personnel or disrupt our operation, the U.S. presence will be swift and the response will be swift and forceful. We will defend our people with devastating force if necessary.
And outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said that everything is being done to evacuate Dutch embassy staff, interpreters and others who deserve our protection out of Afghanistan. Rutte said that the situation in Afghanistan is very confusing and extremely worrying. Earlier, multiple transport planes were sent to Afghanistan to pick up, among others, embassy workers, interpreters. Dutch Defense Minister meanwhile said that multiple military flights are being flown to Afghanistan for the safe evacuation of its nationals and the supporting Afghan people. And Australia meanwhile said that it would send 250 military personnel to Kabul to evacuate its citizens and an unspecified number of Afghans who had been given visas after working with Canberra. While evacuation flights restarted this morning, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that Australia would probably not be able to assist all those in Afghanistan who are eligible for Canberra's assistance.
Australians have been there for 20 years. And for 20 years, we've been able to seek to protect a generation. Australia doesn't act alone in these efforts. And the sad truth is that with the decisions that have been taken, that is not something that Australia can continue to do. Australia has exerted every effort to help the people of Afghanistan over these last 20 years. We have lost 41 of our own in that great cause. And I can say that Australia has done all within its power, all within her power, to provide safety for the people of Afghanistan. And what we see now is heartbreaking.
And French President Emmanuel Macron meanwhile said that France and Germany will push for your European plan to tackle migration flows from Afghanistan as people flee the Taliban's control. Macron's announcement on migration comes amid mixed messages from EU capitals on Europe's willingness to help Afghans desperate to flee the Taliban take over their country. The French president also called on the United Nations to tackle the Afghan crisis and announced that common initiatives will be adopted in the coming hours. Earlier in the day, Macron spoke with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as well as attending a meeting with his own ministers. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel also expressed concern about the quickly deteriorating situation in Afghanistan after the Taliban seized control. The German Chancellor said that developments in Afghanistan are bitter, dramatic and terrible. Merkel said that efforts will be made to offer support and refuge particularly for the Afghan support staff who helped the German military. She said she was in intensive discussions with French President Emmanuel Macron on the evacuation of people and follow-up developments. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom has warned the Taliban that it will be held to account if it does not protect human rights in Afghanistan after overthrowing the country's government. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said that Britain will use all the means it has at its disposal to hold the Taliban to account in Afghanistan.
We're using our G7 presidency to make very clear to the Taliban that we will hold them to account for their commitment and never to allow Afghanistan to be used as a base for terror, to hold a more inclusive government and to protect the most essential human rights, including respecting the rights of women.
Turkey, meanwhile, evacuated over 300 people from Kabul on a Turkish Airlines flight after the Taliban seized control of the Afghan capital. The Turkish nationals were brought to Istanbul airport with a Turkish Airlines plane under the coordination of the Turkish Foreign Ministry. Speaking to reporters on arrival at Istanbul, passengers said they had to wait up to 3 hours on the plane while troops cleared the runway of civilians. And in the chaos and uncertainty of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, Afghan legislator Farzana Koshai said that she fears for her life for the first time and her freedom next, but Afghans will not tolerate a return to the harshest forms of Islamist rule. Blindsided by the speed of events, the 29-year-old who was born in the northern province of Baghlan has represented the nomadic Afghans for more than 2 years. Fires of questions churning in her mind. Like other Afghans, she's lying low at home with no idea how the situation will pan out for elected representatives such as her or anyone else. Kochai said that the generation that has grown up since 2001 would no longer tolerate hardline rule. Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai said that US President Joe Biden must take a bold step to protect the Afghan people. In an exclusive interview to BBC on the plight of Afghanistan, Yousafzai also requested world leaders to open their borders to Afghan refugees and displaced people.
I am deeply concerned about the situation in Afghanistan right now, especially about the safety of women and girls there. This is actually an urgent humanitarian crisis right now that we need to provide our help and support. We cannot just look at our screens and not do anything and just get into the politics of what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened. I have been trying to reach out to many global leaders. I think every country has a role and responsibility right now. Countries need to open their borders to Afghan refugees, to the displaced people.
And let's now move on to our developing story. In a landmark achievement, over 88,13,000 doses of vaccines have been administered under the largest vaccination drive in the past 24 hours, achieving the highest single-day record of COVID-19 vaccination. The cumulative vaccination coverage has increased to 55.47 crores. This translates to 46% of all adult Indians receiving the first dose. 13% of all adult Indians have received both doses of vaccine and are protected against COVID-19. And India reported 25,166 daily new cases in the last 24 hours. This is the lowest number of cases reported in 154 days. India's active case load today stands at 3,69,846, which is the lowest in 146 days. Active cases now constitute 1.15% of the total cases of the country's total positive cases, which is the lowest since March 2020. 36,830 patients recovered during the last 24 hours. With this, the recovery rate has risen to 97.51%. This is the highest recovery rate since March 2020. A total 3,14,48,754 recoveries have been reported across the country so far. With substantially ramped up testing capacity across the country, a total of 15,63,985 tests were conducted in the last 24 hours in the country. Cumulatively, India has conducted over 49.66 crore tests so far. While on one side, testing capacity has been enhanced across the country, weekly positivity rate currently stands at 1.98% and the daily positivity rate stands at 1.61%. Daily positivity rate has remained below 3% for the last 22 days, while the weekly positivity rate has remained below 3% for the last 53 days. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia, who is on a day-long visit to Assam, has reached Guwahati this afternoon. Assam's Health Minister today welcomed the Union Health Minister in Guwahati. The Health Minister's visit aims to review the COVID-19 situation in northeastern states. All the health ministers of northeastern states are likely to attend the review meeting. He will also review the construction works of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, or AIIMS, at the Changsari in Kamrup district. I'm moving to Maharashtra now. All parks, grounds, sea faces and beaches in Mumbai municipal area will now be open to the public from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. as part of the break the chain measures to restore public life after COVID-19 cases have come under control. It will be important to maintain social distance at public places and avoid crowding. Wearing of masks will be compulsory. Violations of COVID instructions will result in legal action being taken against the violators. Malls in Maharashtra will remain open till 10 p.m. under the new break the chain order. Only those who have been fully vaccinated and completed 14 days will be allowed inside the malls, including the visitors and employees. Those below the age of 18 will be required to carry identity cards, including Aadhaar, for age proof, as the age group is not vaccinated. And in Maharashtra, 10 new cases of COVID Delta plus variant was found. With this, the total number of cases in the state has gone up to 76. State Health Minister Rajesh Tope said that 100 samples are taken a week from every district of the state regarding Delta plus variant. It's tested at the National Institute of Virology. Rajesh Tope said that the new government has a keen eye on the variant, so there's no need to worry much. All high, low-risk patients are being isolated.
जो वेरिएंट है उसके बारे में अभी संख्या कुल मिला के 76 हुई है। आज 10 की बढ़ोतरी उसमें हुई है, कल तक 66 थी। डरने वाली कोई बात नहीं है। इसमें हम सभी इंडेक्स केसेस को आइसोलेट कर रहे हैं और सभी जो हाई रिस्क और लो रिस्क कॉन्टैक्ट्स है उनको भी टेस्टिंग कर रहे हैं, उनको भी आइसोलेट कर रहे हैं। चिंता वाली बात कोई नहीं है, लेकिन हम उस पर नज़र रखे हुए हैं।
And my colleague Shama Mishra now joins us on the situation in Maharashtra, the unlock and the COVID situation. Shama, give us a sense of, have things improved enough for the unlock to happen?
Well, drastically, Mumbai has been seeing, and whole of Maharashtra has been seeing, that the numbers of the COVID positive cases have come down, and now it is at a stable range of 4,000 to 5,000 every day. Mumbai and other urban areas have also seen a decline in the positive cases, and yesterday we did see that a number a little above 4,000 were reported from Maharashtra, of which of the all active cases, more than 5,000 people have been discharged yesterday. So the ratio has been looking good over here. But one major concern still lies in front of Maharashtra government is the number of fatalities reported every day. So yesterday also 100 people have lost their lives due to COVID, and this remains a challenge for the state government. Apart from that, we've also been talking about the unlock process in Maharashtra. So we had seen that Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray, while addressing the state, had a week back said that many of the facilities would be opening up, including the local train services for those who have been fully vaccinated and completed 14 days past that. So yes, we did see from 15th of August, the train services have begun for those who are having the passes and the special QR codes. Apart from that, yesterday, another break the chain order had said that parks, sea faces, beaches would now be open for public. Earlier, we were seeing that people were not allowed to sit on the sea faces or go on the beaches, but that has changed now. Apart from that, we are also seeing that the malls all over Maharashtra, the malls would be allowed to open till 10. But the rider over here is that everyone or anyone entering the mall should be fully vaccinated and must have completed 14 days. So this includes the people who are visiting, also the people who are working in the mall. People below the age group of 18, because they are not fully vaccinated, they are not vaccinated at all. So those people will have to carry their identification cards so that their age is visible on that. We also knew that Maharashtra government was to start the schools for the urban areas, but that decision has been deferred after the task force from Maharashtra. They objected to this decision because children are not fully vaccinated, even though the teachers have been asked and every staff of these schools have been asked to get totally vaccinated, but that doesn't help because children would be sitting in close range, and that definitely poses a challenge in front of Maharashtra. So we know for the fact that vaccinating everyone would be a weapon against the third wave and also against the third lockdown. So Maharashtra yesterday achieved another milestone by administering more than 5 crore vaccination doses, and now we are seeing that Maharashtra till yesterday has completed 5,55,000 vaccination doses. This includes both first and second doses. So now all the onus lies on people because state government is slowly opening up all the facilities. Now we are the ones who have to be responsible and responsibly follow the COVID appropriate behavior. Back to you.
Absolutely, Shama, and one hopes that this change comes about in people's behavior to maintain COVID appropriate behavior, because COVID, remember, hasn't gone away yet. Many thanks, Shama Mishra, for joining us and giving us that update. And moving on to our national crime segment now. As India sent its biggest ever contingent to the Paralympic Games of 54 para-athletes from across 9 sports disciplines, Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with the Indian para-athlete contingent for Tokyo 2020 via video conferencing. While interacting with the Paralympic contingent today, the Prime Minister said that the nation stands in support of the Paralympic athletes, just like it cheered for players in Tokyo Olympics.
आपके अंदर तो जिंदगी को जीतने का कॉन्फिडेंस भी है और गेम जीतना तो आपके लिए बाएं हाथ का खेल होता है। मेडल तो मेहनत से अपने आप आने ही वाले हैं। आपने देखा ही है, ओलंपिक्स में हमारे कुछ खिलाड़ी जीते तो कुछ चूके भी, लेकिन देश सबके साथ मजबूती से खड़ा था, सबके लिए चीयर कर रहा था। साथियों, एक खिलाड़ी के तौर पर आप ये बखूबी जानते हैं कि मैदान में जितनी फिजिकल स्ट्रेंथ की जरूरत होती है, उतनी ही मेंटल स्ट्रेंथ भी मायने रखती है। आप लोग तो विशेष रूप से ऐसी परिस्थितियों से निकल करके आगे बढ़े हैं जहां मेंटल स्ट्रेंथ से ही इतना कुछ मुमकिन हुआ है। इसलिए आज देश अपने खिलाड़ियों के लिए इन सभी बातों का ध्यान रख रहा है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi further said that the government is strongly working towards strengthening and encouraging the talents that reside in rural areas, and said that over 300 Khelo India centers have been created to help recognize the talents of aspiring athletes.
देश के 250 से ज्यादा जिलों में 360 खेलो इंडिया सेंटर्स बनाए गए हैं ताकि स्थानीय स्तर पर ही प्रतिभाओं की पहचान हो, उन्हें मौका मिले। आने वाले दिनों में इन सेंटर्स की संख्या बढ़ाकर 1000 तक की जाएगी। इसी तरह हमारे खिलाड़ियों के सामने एक और चुनौती संसाधनों की भी होती थी। आप खेलने जाते थे तो अच्छे ग्राउंड, अच्छे उपकरण नहीं होते थे। इसका भी असर खिलाड़ी के मनोबल पर पड़ता था। वो खुद को दूसरे देशों के खिलाड़ियों से कमतर समझने लग जाता था। लेकिन आज देश में स्पोर्ट्स से जुड़े इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का भी विस्तार किया जा रहा है। देश ने खुले मन से अपने हर एक खिलाड़ी की पूरी मदद कर रहा है। टारगेट ओलंपिक, पोडियम स्कीम, इसके जरिए भी देश ने खिलाड़ियों को जरूरी व्यवस्थाएं दी।
And Union Sports Minister Anurag Thakur thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi and said that the encouragement given by Prime Minister to the players from time to time is a source of inspiration. The Union Sports Minister also mentioned that on instructions of the Prime Minister, the Sports Ministry has ensured that all facilities are provided to our players.
प्रधानमंत्री जी, आपका खेल के प्रति अभिरुचि और खेलों को बढ़ावा देने में आपका मार्गदर्शन, आपके द्वारा खिलाड़ियों को समय समय पर दिया गया प्रोत्साहन, ये हम सबके लिए प्रेरणा स्रोत है। मैंने पिछले कल भी देखा, आपने ओलंपिक से लौटे हमारे सभी खिलाड़ियों को अपने निवास स्थान पर चाय पर बुलाया था। 2 घंटे से ज्यादा समय आपने खिलाड़ियों से बिताया। आपके जाने के बाद खिलाड़ी और भावुक थे और खेल फेडरेशन के लोग ये कह रहे थे कि जिस देश का प्रधानमंत्री इतना समय खिलाड़ियों को, खेल संस्थाओं को देता हो, उस देश के युवा कुछ भी करने के लिए तैयार होंगे। मैं यही कहूंगा कि कोरोना महामारी की विषम परिस्थितियों के दौरान भी आपने खिलाड़ियों का मनोबल गिरने नहीं दिया, बल्कि समय समय पर आपने उनका मार्गदर्शन किया है। आपने खिलाड़ियों के लिए चीयर फॉर इंडिया कैंपेन जो लॉन्च किया, उससे पूरे देश भर में एक जागरूकता भी फैली और देशवासी अपना प्यार, आशीर्वाद और शुभकामनाएं एकजुट होकर दे रहे थे।
The Paralympic Committee of India, President Deepa Malik, said that this team of 54 players is going to Tokyo Paralympics is a reflection of India at 75.
Sports Ministry, Target Olympic Podium Scheme, Sports Authority of India का योगदान बेहद सराहनीय रहा है। मैं गर्व के साथ कहती हूँ कि टोक्यो 2020 पैरालंपिक्स में जाने वाला 54 खिलाड़ियों का दल हमारे नए इंडिया एट 75 भारत का एक प्रतिबिंब है। वो भारत जो अपने दिव्यांग को सशक्त, फिट और खेलने खिलने का पूरा अवसर दे रहा है।
And Rio Paralympic gold medalist Mariyappan Thangavelu will be the flag bearer of the Indian contingent at the Tokyo Paralympics this time. Mariyappan Thangavelu said that he does not feel any fear about his performance while playing for the country.
जिंदगी में इसका भी कोई रोल रहता है कि कभी डर रहता है कि अरे यार कभी हार गया तो क्योंकि आपने तो ऊंचाई बना ली है।
No sir, always मेरा thinking only country में सर। Anytime country, मेरा country anytime ऊपर में सर। मेरा thinking anytime है सर।
And Rio Paralympic gold medalist Devinder Jajaria told the Prime Minister about 2 biggest achievements of his life.
अच्छा देवेंद्र जी, आप इतने सारे गोल्ड मेडल जीत चुके हैं। देवेंद्र जी, आपको अपने कैरियर की कौन सी उपलब्धि है जो सबसे बड़ी लगती है?
सर, मेरे को सच बताऊं 2 उपलब्धियां बहुत बड़ी लगती। एक तो मुझे ये लगता है कि जब मैं एबल बॉडी में पहली बार खेला था और मैं डिस्ट्रिक्ट का चैंपियन बना, तो उस दिन मुझे ऐसा महसूस हुआ कि मैंने ओलंपिक का मेडल जीत लिया, कि 15-16 साल उम्र थी, अब मुझे कोई कमजोर नहीं कहेगा। मुझे अलग से फील हुआ कि अब मुझे कोई कमजोर नहीं कहेगा। और कहीं न कहीं 12 साल का इंतजार था, तो वो 12 साल का वेट रियो पैरालंपिक्स का, वो भी वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड के साथ गोल्ड मेडल जीता। और जब राष्ट्रीय गान हुआ तो उस टाइम में मुझे इतनी खुशी हुई कि मैं उस खुशी का बयान भी नहीं कर सकता।
And para archer Rakesh Kumar, during his conversation with the Prime Minister, said that his coach had a very important contribution in his life.
राकेश जी, आपके कोच का आपके जीवन में क्या योगदान रहा है?
सर, ये बात सच है कि जब 2009 में मेरा एक्सीडेंट हुआ था तो मेरा जीवन काफी अस्त व्यस्त हो गया था। मुझे करीब 1 साल के लिए अगर मुझे बेड से बैठना भी होता तो मुझे 2 बंदों की आवश्यकता होती थी। लेकिन 2017 में जब मेरी मुलाकात मेरे कोच श्री कुलदीप कुमार वेतवान जी से हुई एक रोड क्रॉस करते समय, तो उन्होंने मुझे तीरंदाजी के लिए मोटिवेट किया। उन्होंने मुझे श्री माता वैष्णो देवी श्राइन बोर्ड स्टेडियम में आमंत्रित किया। मैं वहाँ पे गया। मैंने देखा सर, क्योंकि तीरंदाजी एक दिमाग का खेल है, इसमें ज़्यादा आपको कुछ करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, बैठना है। तो सर व्हील चेयर पर मैं वैसे ही बैठा रहता था, तो इसमें ज़्यादा मुझे मुश्किल नहीं हुई। लेकिन सर मैं इसमें श्री माता वैष्णो देवी श्राइन बोर्ड का तहे दिल से शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि जिन्होंने वहाँ पे एक तीरंदाजी केंद्र स्थापित किया और ट्रेनिंग से लेके सारे उपकरण सर हमें फ्री में दिए जाते थे। काफ़ी सारी जो भी जितनी भी सुविधाएं हैं वहाँ पे वो मुझे फ्री में मिली हैं। इसके लिए मेरे कोच साहब का बहुत बड़ा मार्गदर्शन से ही मैं यहाँ तक पहुँच पाया हूँ सर।
And para archer Jyoti Balyan, during her interaction with the Prime Minister, said that she would love to eat bhindi ki sabzi and roti made by her mother when she comes back after winning a medal from the Tokyo Paralympics.
अभी तो खा नहीं पाती होगी, लेकिन जब गोल्ड लेकर के आओगी, माँ के पास जाओगी तो सबसे पहले क्या खाने के लिए मांगोगी?
सर मुझे भिंडी बहुत पसंद है और घर की मतलब अपनी मम्मी की हाथ की रोटी, तो सर वही खाना पसंद करूंगी।
And our young Indian archery contingent brought home 15 medals, including 8 golds, 2 silvers and 5 bronze at the just concluded World Archery Youth Championships in Wrocław in Poland, followed by the winning exploits of youth archers. Union Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur will meet the archery cadets team at Tuesday at the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting Office in New Delhi. Here's a report. Well, we couldn't bring you that report. We'll bring that to you in subsequent bulletins due to paucity of time. Well, that's it in Midday Prime. Thanks for watching. Namaskar. Have a good day.